All right, joining me now here on the Matthew Filipowicz Show is William Rivers Pitt. William is a columnist and senior editor at Truthout. He is the author of several books. His latest, co-authored with Dahr Jamail, is The Mass Destruction of Iraq, Why It's Happening and Who is Responsible, all of which you can find at truthout.org. You can also find him on Twitter at WRPitt. Will, thank you so much for being on the show.
Really glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
All right, so let's start out by discussing the new book. It's actually a collection of your and Dahr's coverage from Iraq beginning in 2003, correct?
It is. It struck me and struck the both of us that, especially about back in June, when all of the old usual suspects came boiling out of the woodwork to not only defend themselves for what's going on in Iraq, but to try to blame it on the current administration. It struck Dahr and I that I suppose you could call it scholarship in an awful sort of way. The two of us, mine in my research and my interviews and all the work that I did, and Dahr in his unbelievably peerless work from the ground in Iraq, had built together a decade's worth of background information to the 10th decimal on what happened in that country, who was responsible, and it occurred to the both of us that if people like Dick Cheney and the rest of these guys are going to come squirming up from under the floorboards to try to redefine history, that somebody needed to lay down a brick and mortar history of why we're in the situation that we're in that country.
So I guess the next thing for us to do here is let's kind of discuss, I guess, sort of like kind of three main eras, I guess. So that would be the build up to the Iraq War, and not that fighting has ever really stopped in Iraq. We should know that. But like the build up, the U.S. quote war itself, and then U.S. post-war that leads us to where we are today. So let's start up with discuss kind of the main important points that people should, if they don't know already, should know, or if they know, they should try to remember now that, we have another mess happen, the continued mess in Iraq. So what are the more important things to remember for people from the build up to the war in Iraq itself?
Well, that's a very large question, but in short, one of the things that my particular aspect of the book focuses on is the group of people: Don Rumsfeld, Dick Cheney, Bill Kristol, Paul Wolfowitz, and the rest of this particular crew that had their sights on this invasion and this occupation with the idea of being there permanently since 1991. They were a think tank called the Project for the New American Century, and nobody took them seriously for years until the Supreme Court, in its infinite wisdom, gave us George W. Bush, and George W. Bush made Dick Cheney his vice president, and Dick Cheney took all of these guys and put them into the foreign policy apparatus of the American government. And it's incredibly, it's very detailed, and there's a lot of history to it. But long story short, these people were game planning for this since the first Gulf War. And when they were given the opportunity to be in positions of awesome power under the George W. Bush administration, they took advantage of it immediately when the towers weren't even down, and they were running around the White House halls saying, we have to go to war against Iraq. This was their Pearl Harbor, so to speak, and they took full advantage of it.
Yeah, I mean, even in the letter from the Project for the New American Century, they actually do mention that in order for us to get back into Iraq, we will need like a Pearl Harbor like instance to actually get us back, and they got it with 9/11, and they pounced.
Absolutely true, and everybody got rich in the meantime.